Hey guys, this is Tim Pachote, the Liberty Advisor, also here with John Sneisen, the Economic Truth. And today, this is going to be sort of an introductory podcast because, John and I have put out, probably about a dozen videos in the past, maybe more. But we're always, we're all busy, we're all doing our own thing. And sometimes it is hard to, have a super well documented, formatted report. And so a lot of times we think about doing videos and think about, putting out podcasts, but we spend a lot more time thinking about it than actually doing it. So now what we're doing today is we are actually just going ahead and doing it. And it's going to be a lot more of a longer format show. And John, we do hear some kind of rustling in the background. I'm not sure if that's one of your dogs, if you might want to mute yourself with the dog.
Yeah, it's my dogs there.
Okay. And my dogs just left the room, but we all love dogs. But yeah, so this show, we're going to talk a lot about, obviously, with John and I's background, we're going to talk a lot about economics, finance, crypto, some geopolitics because it affects the stock market and economy. And then I just want to also point out that we will have links below to our Discord because, let's face it, all the stuff that we talk about, everything we just named right there are all the things that YouTube doesn't like people talking about, all the things Facebook doesn't like talking about. About 1% of people even see us on WHAM. World Alternative Media. So I'd like to say hello to those of you on World Alternative Media, because even though I've been on about 70 different shows, people constantly like, oh yeah, you're the new guy who I think you've been on like one show. I'm like, no, I've done like 70, but because of the shadow banning, maybe you don't even know who John is, or maybe you don't know who both of us are. But anyways, we're here hoping to give you guys some great content. And now we're going to, try getting into it. But I also want to point out that we are going to have this, since it is going to be longer format, is going to be podcast as well. So you guys can see the podcast links down below. We're going to have a Discord where that's where we're going to monitor comments and really what John and I do on a daily basis is we save articles. Those articles then get saved into Discord because, that's, we're finance, economic geeks, and we want to, have this information, saved because we know that, a lot of this information gets memory hold or, hey, this was great, when we looked it up 2 years ago, but now when we Googled the exact definition, now we can't even find things. And so, we save, there we go. We've got the dog in there. Very nice. We save, John is a powerhouse, probably saving 20 articles a day. I'm probably saving usually at least a dozen articles a day. I'm just getting over a sickness now, so I will be a lot more active. But, speaking of, the economy, we've got all the, quote unquote elites right now up in Davos. And I know that John's been tracking some of the stuff going on in Davos. And of course, now I've got my dogs making sound in the background. But John, what are some of the things going on at Davos? Or maybe first, if you want to explain to people what Davos even is.
Yeah, well, Davos is a forum where all the elites, central bankers, all the corporations, finance ministers, it's like kind of a mini form of, what would you call it, like a Jackson Hole. Well, it's a bigger form of Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and they're trying to just go there and shoot the shit and get drunk and ski up in the mountains. Basically, that's what they're doing. It's
after they fly there on their private jets and then lecture us about carbon.
Oh, of course, yeah, and then that's the big thing here. It's like all of them are flying in on private jets, of course, and you got of course Greta is up there at Davos right now complaining, about everybody using too much carbon, and then everybody's like, oh yeah, that's right, but we're flying in on private jets, so we have we literally charter a plane for our whole nation full of elites and politicians, and then we actually go and drink and spend all of the country's money up there, which with all the taxes that you see as taxation is theft. So that's basically what it is. It's just a big I don't know, a big party basically that's happening up in the mountains, and they like to talk about all the problems in the world that they're not solving, and that's usually how it is, Tim. And of course, I just watched an interview with Donald Trump is there this year, and Donald, I found it hilarious. Donald is it's always the greatest, the grandest, and the best. Whatever he does in the U.S. economy, and of course he was saying that they cut taxes in half. So literally, if you cut taxes in half,
huge.
Yeah. So if you cut taxes in half, there would be very little taxes being paid right now in the United States, and that's that's not really true, is it, Tim?
No,
And then of
he
course,
absolutely did not cut taxes in half. And one of the reasons I started doing a podcast is so that way I could like remember things that I did a long time ago and wouldn't have to constantly keep drumming this stuff back up. But when he first proposed the very first tax proposal that they came out with was amazing. And it was all geared towards, kind of either like the real small business owner. Because, I mean, they define small business owner as like, under $200 million of revenue. I mean, they don't define it as like the guy making 200,000, which even most people think that person's super rich, when really at the end of the day, even that business is micro, tiny. And so the first one was amazing. I did a whole podcast on it, was just, jumping for joy on that. And then what they came out with was basically a corporate cash grab. But what really pisses me off about this whole thing is that, I think I saw an article the other day yesterday where Trump said, somebody asked about the budget and he goes, who the hell cares about the budget? We're going to have a country. And so, first off, you have to ask yourself, what does having a country even mean? I mean, if anything, it's like USA Inc. corporation. But the thing is, he did cut taxes, and my taxes did go down. The increased standard deductions, that's nice. But a lot of this cash grab went to the big Fortune 500 companies that hate him, and then they allowed them to then buy back their own stock. And the other thing it did is now it's giving the perception. This is the crux of what really pisses me off about this, is that even though tax receipts went up, the other thing that massively went up was government spending. And so now I see all these groups like Patriotic Millionaires is one of the ones that I troll on Facebook. They're probably the worst. And, these guys have plenty of fodder now to say, look what all these damn, conservatives and Republicans and Tea Party people did. They cut taxes on the rich. And now, the deficit is ballooned above $1 trillion again. And we're going to have to go elect a Democrat to go fix everything because, and I'm just saying this is what the optics are, not that I actually believe any of this. But, when you've got Donald Trump, he was a Democrat until, the early 2000s. And at one point, I think Bloomberg was actually a Republican while he was a Democrat, or maybe it was like within like a few months time span of this. I don't have everything memorized when it comes to this, but it's just that the optics now that, not that I give a crap about Republicans, but now the quote unquote conservatives are now going to get, and the ideology of trying to lower taxes is now going to be conflated with, oh, this is just a big corporate cash grab for the rich, and anytime you lower taxes, it's going to hurt the poor the most. And this is the reason why the deficit exploded. Except the thing is, the receipts went up, so the tax income. So by cutting taxes, we actually got more tax revenue. But the main problem is that then the spending went way the hell through the roof. And so that's, sorry for that little jaunt or little aside, but that's what probably pisses me off the most about what Donald Trump is doing. We're going to have a country. What good is a country? Now, that sounds like a Bernie Sanders one, but what good is a country if, like in 30 years when our great grandchildren, or well, probably not great grandchildren, but maybe then for me grandchildren, what do they want our daughters to be, like prostitutes or something? Because that's what's going on in Venezuela. That's what's going on in all these other socialist countries, where at the exact moment where you've got 10,000 seniors a day turning 65 who are now going to be collecting from Social Security, collecting from Medicare, absolutely draining the system. At the same time, you've got the millennials who are now, wanting all this free stuff when they're going to be the ones who need to subsidize everybody like a bunch of idiots. And so I couldn't think of a worse time to try to have socialism than right now, when we had this, awesome, everything was going great in the 50s and 60s and 70s. We had demographics working for us. We had manufacturing. We had, we were the engine of the world, and we've squandered all that and have $23 trillion of debt, which doesn't even include Social Security or Medicare, or which is actually bigger than unfunded liability than Social Security. I'm talking about Medicare. And now people want all this extra free stuff at the exact worst time possible, in my opinion. And this is all going to blow up at some point. And this is one of the reasons why John and I spend so much time talking about, cryptocurrencies and precious metals, because eventually it's going to go. It's only just a matter of when. So I don't know. Do you have anything more you wanted to report on from that was going on in Davos, or that you were tracking up there?
Yeah, let's just give me 1 second here. I'm going to have actually a look on, let's see here. Of course, we talked about the climate change. Actually, there was the lowest turnout of British attendance at the Davos meeting now, which has to do with Brexit. They don't want to be a part of this whole global elitist, fun fest up in the Swiss mountains. And there was a couple more here we looked at. Yeah, of course, Trump attacked climate activists at the Davos. That makes sense. And then this one is interesting, Tim. It's an article from the Wall Street Journal, which says that CEOs shows optimism at Davos despite gloomy data. So basically, the CEOs of the big corporations are trying to save their face, and they're out there saying that, oh yeah, everything is good. They gotta play into the Fed, doing quantitative easing, which it is. And also they gotta play up to all their share buybacks. 40% of U.S. corporations are now zombie corporations. Here in Canada, it's 80% of corporations listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange is zombie corporations.
Do you want to define zombie corporations for people?
Yeah, zombie corporation is basically you just paying the interest on the debt. There's nothing else that you pay, and you can't even pay down any principal anymore. So they're basically loading up on more debt, paying just keep on paying that interest, and that's what every single government almost around the world is doing. Provincial, state, if it is county, whatever it is, usually they just pay down the interest. They don't even care to pay down the principal on the debt most times. So that happens a lot. So there's a lot of zombies in the economy, and nobody's able to ever pay down that debt. It's so funny how the second comment that Trump made when they did the CNBC interview in Davos was, oh yeah, we're gonna, we want lower rates so we can refinance. But then he said right after that, and then we're gonna pay off all the debt. So we're gonna refinance, but then pay off all the debt. That's two completely different things, Trump. But anyways, so that's kind of what has been talking about.
Well, he was. I mean, in 2016, he was campaigning on after 8 years, we're gonna have the debt is gonna be zero. Well, we're in this zero sum system where you can't just have the debt be zero because the money is based off of debt. So in order to get $1 into the system, you have to create $1 of debt because you don't have to. That's just the way that our current high-tech slavery system was set up back in 1913. So you can thank all the overlords and all the elites for that has foisted that on us for over 100 years, which I'm sort of shocked that they've been able to keep it together for over 100 years. But yeah, I mean, out of all things that Trump is doing, I mean, he sold himself as I'm going to come in there and I'm going to have the debt go down to zero. I mean, we all knew that wasn't going to happen. But to actually then go and double Obama's deficit, I mean, Obama. And I did, celebrate yesterday was his 3rd year out of office. So, it was also my daughter's birthday, which is how I remember that. So I always got, the day my daughter was born was the first full day Obama was out of office. So what a great time to be alive that she never had to experience.
Two good things at one time. Yeah. And she never.
Yeah, and it's and some of the other stuff that's going on with the economy and with Trump, because that's what a lot of what we're talking about today, and we'll probably get into some of this impeachment BS that's going on as well. But there was also the trade deal that came out with China, and everyone's touting up this awesome trade deal that's going on. Well, the thing is, there's basically no teeth at all to this trade deal, and if there's no teeth and there's no real repercussions, then it's not really a deal. And I think there was something along the lines of, if a complaining party makes a complaint to the party that's being complained to and they can't agree, then the complaining party can basically unilaterally just get rid of the agreement and go on their own separate ways. So it's like, if I'm like, oh, hey, you're not living up to your end of the bargain, and you're like, well, I'm living up to the end of the bargain. You're like, well, no, you're not. And then you don't have a deal anymore. I mean, that's essentially what the teeth of this whole thing comes down to. I mean, there's like absolutely, they're going to buy a whole bunch of, agricultural exports. So great. It's going to make, things that keep Americans alive cost more, like food, and maybe some energy stuff as well. But there's no way you can just force a country to go buy, this amount of goods. And, and then I guess also kind of skipping around, Trump and Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, they did float the idea prior to coming into office of having 50 and 100-year bonds. And they said, and Trump was saying, oh, it's so stupid that Obama is, putting out all these short-term bonds. We should be locking in these lower rates for a long time. So the problem is they can't afford to have the rate. And I forgot what the average rate the government was borrowing at. I mean, it's always moving around. It's always a moving target. But let's say it was 2%. Well, they couldn't even afford to lock it in for 30 years at 3%. And so they had to so they were actually issuing shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter term bonds. And so not only did Trump not increased the maturity and the duration of the bond portfolio. He actually decreased it, but now they're talking. I mean, they do a lot of talk. Like, they do a lot of talk about, oh, and a lot of libertarians like, oh, he's doing a great job of, getting troops out. Well, maybe that, maybe 2 weeks ago they blew that, but they talk about getting troops out, but then you look at the reality is there's more troops over there than ever. And then they talk about having, buying these longer term bonds. Then the reality is now the Fed is they're not engaged in quantitative easing because they're buying all these short-term bonds, which, apparently when you print money and you buy short-term bonds, that doesn't count as quantitative easing, only when you buy longer-term bonds. But it'd be smarter if they were doing it on buying longer-term bonds, but they aren't. And so it's just absolutely, ridiculous. And eventually it's just one of those, things where I think, excuse my language, but I think people are probably like, fuck it. We're going to be bankrupt anyways. Might as well just, max out the credit card all the way. But what he wants to do is he wants to balance transfer the credit card, which, would be a good idea if we can get away with it. But then who's going to buy that? During his Chinese press conference, he also made mention to and alluded to the fact that, other countries, they've got 0% rates or rates below zero. And the Fed, they're stupid. They don't have rates that are zero. We need to have rates below zero. But, but the real idiots are those people who are buying that debt.
Yeah.
Chinese are there. And they're the ones that you need to have them buy the debt, you idiot. And now here you are saying like how stupid it would be to buy the debt while your biggest, creditor, well, it's actually the biggest creditor is actually the Fed, but for a sovereign.
100%. Actually, Tim, there was an article that was floating around, I think, for about a month or so ago that I talked about, I think, in a Josh video on World Alternative Media. But it was actually stating, I think, since September, it said, and this was in December, it said that since September, the Fed had bought 90% of all the treasuries issued by the U.S. government. So there you go. Basically, it's nobody is stupid enough to buy all this new debt. It's all the Federal Reserve and other, of course, over there in Japan. They've been buying a whole bunch of debt as well. Other than, of course, the pension funds that have been sitting on negative yielding debt over there in Japan. So like
Japan's even worse off than we are, which is hard to imagine that. I mean, they sell more. I mean, what happens is all these ripple effects. I mean, it's not just the fact that so what happens when a country goes broke? Then all of a sudden people can't afford to have kids. Then the population gets aging, and now they're at the point where most men over there don't even want to have sex, and they sell more adult diapers than they do children's diapers. So I mean, so that's the economy you want? You want an economy where it's so depressing that even guys don't even want to get laid, and they're selling more adult diapers? I mean, is that the future we want? We want to Japanify ourselves? And if you think I'm joking, go look it up. I mean,
no, well, it's not just that's going to be Japanified. It's exactly what their monetary policy has been over, ever since the 80s when they had their peak and their massive bubble. And then, of course, they had the demographic cliff on top of that where people are aging, as you said. So there's been, no money coming in to fuel the debt bubble that you need in order to keep the fractional reserve banking system over there in Japan going. So what ended up happening is that the Central Bank of Japan, the Bank of Japan, has been buying assets, and not just we're not talking about just Japanese yen bonds. We're talking about a wide array of other things, including real estate, including stocks, including exchange-traded funds, among others. And I believe there's one or two more if you go and look at the balance sheet of Bank of Japan. But that's what they've been doing. And that's, Tim, you're muted, by the way. That's what we're seeing. And if we actually look at that, and I actually wrote an article almost 3 years ago now where I said that the Fed will own everything then nothing. And that's what we're heading towards because, Ben Bernanke in 2002, his Fed governor, he wasn't a governor yet, but he was in the Fed already. But he did a speech where they said that, we need to look at, what type of assets and expand the amount of and type of assets that we're buying as, the central bank. And that's where we're heading because who's going to, look at the ETF crisis over in Japan because that's what's coming here. All these passive funds that, everybody's piling into to follow the, the S&P 500 or whatever it is. When you want to exit out of that, like, do they have all the capital for all the, the actual money that piled into it? Or are they like the ETFs of gold and silver where, there's, 300-400 shares issued per unit of of gold, for example. Is that I think that's where we are at, and that's why Japan owns the Japanese central bank owns 86.11% as of a year ago of the exchange traded funds in Japan.
Yeah, so it's like their version of the S&P 500. I mean, I think it's actually the Nikkei 100, so it's their top 100 stocks over there. And yeah, I mean, Japan, the Bank of Japan is, I believe, the largest owner in like basically all of them. Like all, like, so if you just look at, like, go down like the roster of who owns it, and that is actual fascism. And this is something I've been talking about for probably about 4 or 5 years. Whenever they started doing this, I don't know if it's like late 2014. I can't remember the exact time frame when they started doing this, but this is actual fascism. When you have the state and corporate merger, where you have the state being the Japanese government, the central bank, printing money out of thin air, buying, let's try to printing money sound over there going off keyboards, and then they're using that money to then buy up their stock market. And so a lot of people are like, oh, you guys were predicting all this stuff and you guys have been wrong. Well, I mean, my strategy, I mean, you were talking about ETFs. I mean, I had a strategy where last year, I mean, on average, I think we went up probably over 25%, because I didn't want to fight what the Fed was doing. If they're going to print a bunch of money and do a lot of stupid things, then, I'll have myself and my clients get wealthy off the backs of that. But then I also had hedging strategies too, where in case everything collapsed, we would have been, we still would have went down, but not nearly as much as everybody else. And we can quantify that. And it's just an extra step that almost nobody does when it comes to investing. But, a lot of people who are on the sidelines, they've been going broke safely, and we made about 25% last year. When everything collapsed late 2018, we were down just a few percent. I mean, low single digits. I mean, even people that got it right before at the worst time possible, we're only down low single digits. And that was someone that's 100% invested with us in the stock market without having hardly any money on the cash to sidelines. But it just distorts everything. It distorts, people's perceptions of things. And now you've got, the Dow is, sitting, I don't know what it is right this second, but I mean, it's probably over 29,000, barring any, major crash. I think it was like 29.2 yesterday, last time I looked at it. So, I mean, we're approaching 30,000, but we're doing it off the backs of, first off, I mean, the Dow is just a dumb thing to even follow to begin with, and if people realize like how they actually track the Dow, I mean, it's, you have the S&P 500, which is, I believe they call it a market weighted, and I didn't have this in my notes to talk about, but it's a market weighted price index. So let's say Apple is 2% of the index, and Apple moves 2%, and that move would be 2% of the entire index. Whereas now, let's say you have one stock that trades at $100 and one stock that trades at $1, and they both go up $1. Well, in the Dow, they would both be reflected as going up $1, whereas in the S&P, one would have doubled in price and one would have only gone up 1%. And so there's a big difference between doubling in price and going up 1%. But for whatever reason, the Dow has, that's just, it's got, a lot of, retail space in people's minds if that's what's important. And because people think it's important, it then becomes important. And then, but mainly it's off the backs of these companies using debt to then buy back their own stock, creating this artificial economy where then Donald Trump then gets to go parade around about how great things are, even though it's been done off the backs of doubling the deficit, using all these phony statistics. I mean, I'm going to be giving a presentation at Anarchapulco where I go over the 19 different times that he said that these are fake unemployment numbers. I mean, one of the quotes was, the unemployment number is the most phony BS number that's ever been invented just to make presidents and politicians look good. And direct quote from Donald Trump. But that was 2015. Now, he wants to talk about, how great all these unemployment numbers are, when he very well knows how they're rigged. And so, I mean, at one point he said that the rate was 42% in 2016. So it's gone from 42 down to 3.9. And, even if he was 100% off and it was 21. So it's gone from 21 down to 3.9. And now we're supposed to believe this government stat because it's your swamp creatures putting it out this time. I mean, it's just kind of craziness. But I don't know if you've been paying attention to any of this impeachment stuff going on at all, or any of the
I tried to avoid it actually, because it's just like it's more of like an annoyance, like listening to politicians bullshit each other. But you know what it's all about, and when you look at this whole impeachment thing about Ukraine, it's like nobody's talking about everybody that's involved in Ukraine. Well, of course, like alternative media does, but everybody's over in Ukraine, taking advantage of that government with corporate deals for their kids and all that fun stuff. And of course, Victoria Nuland back in the day, saying that we needed to, topple the Ukrainian government so we could, and of course her husband
On phone, on like a
Yeah,
leaked phone
yeah.
call that
Oh yeah, yeah.
anyone can go see.
Yeah, and the thing is too is that her husband is working for Monsanto as one of the top guys at Monsanto, which of course wanted to get in to
Ukraine
Ukraine
being like
because
a breadbasket of.
yeah, it's the breadbaskets. That's where, of course, if it wasn't for Ukraine, the Soviet Union would have collapsed a lot earlier, because that was the breadbasket of the Soviet Union, and currently it's a big part of the breadbasket for all of Europe because nobody really wants over there, and this is like Russia and everywhere. People seem to be more aware of genetically modified organisms and pesticides over in Europe than here. So a lot of them don't want anything to do
Didn't
with
Putin kick
Monsanto.
like Monsanto out, or Putin did
Yeah, yeah,
something to ban? I'm not 100% sure on that.
yeah. They kicked Monsanto out. They talked about that. GMOs are banned in Russia for farming, by the way, and other things among that. But when it comes to this whole impeachment thing, it's just like a whole bunch of people, on the one side blaming the other side for doing exactly the same thing that they are doing, and it's just like a game of who's ever in power, we're going to dethrone them. But when they get in power, they'll get dethroned the same way. So it's more like similar to what Rome was in its later days, where they started to just blatantly murder each other. Politicians, senators were calling hits on each other and all this stuff. If you go and read back to the near end of the collapse of the Roman democracy that they had over there, after of course it started as a republic, same as the United States, ended up in democracy, and then ended up in tyranny at the end, having an emperor at the helm. So it's quite interesting how that works, Tim. Over history, you see the same things developing now in the
Every
US
democracy always devolves into a tyranny. I mean, I went to a liberal arts school, and they made us take this humanities 1 and 2 class. It's the only class you had to take. And the liberal arts school, they teach you that democracy always devolves into tyranny. Then they go, then they never teach you that you're actually a constitutional republic. I mean, at least us in America over here. And it's just, and then that's a whole nother, can of worms when it gets into Victoria Nuland and all that stuff. I mean,
sorry, just before that, something came to my mind because I listened to this was Donald Trump in Davos again, where he was like, you got Xi over there in China, we're doing great things with the trade deal, but Xi is president for life, and that's really a great thing. That's what he said.
Well, did you see what Google? You see what Google Translator, or there was some sort of Google. I don't know if it's Google, maybe it was Facebook, that they were translating something from when Xi was talking, and it translated his name to President Shithead. And this was like maybe like 3 or 4 days ago. We can pull it up, but yeah, it was like 3 or 4 days ago. I think I saw it on Drudge, or maybe like a Facebook article. But yeah, I mean, this whole like Russian deal is all. I mean, I had a Facebook Live that I did 3 minutes long, September 16th, 2016, saying Trump is going to win and they're going to blame it on the Russians. And this is why they're going to blame it on the Russians. So this whole entire thing is just driving me effing nuts, because not only that I predicted Trump, I predicted that they'd blame it on the Russians. And then seeing all this crap of knowing about Hunter Biden years ago. I mean, a lot of people watching this probably know about it. People knowing about Victoria Nuland and all the crap that was going on. People knowing about, basically, all the Crimea stuff was all about, us putting defensive missile systems up against, so it's like I can put an AR-15 to your head, but no, it's a defensive AR-15. So don't worry about it, John. But when in actuality, you're having missiles that can go strike offensively right up against the border. And so that would piss off anybody. I mean, it would piss off, me down here in Arizona.
Oh, yeah,
the Russians came here in the Mexican border and started putting, defensive missiles pointed right in my backyard. That would
maybe that's the future, Tim. Maybe it's either China or Russia, together we'll start putting missile, launch sites everywhere around us. And then we're in the same boat. This is all about like the thinking of empires, and of course empires, they need of course an empire of debt in order to run their war machine. And of course, as they're going more and more bankrupt, they need to print more money, so they need to go to war to print even more money. So I think we're heading straight towards something, because there's no way out of like a fiat currency collapse, other than of course you could have a free market, anarcho-capitalist society, maybe a whole bunch of different societies. I'm voluntarist. I'm all for all kinds of societies, unless you start attacking each other. That's totally against the non-aggression principle. But we could have a whole bunch of variety of things, because none of us are similar, Tim, And unfortunately, like, people are thinking like collectivists on the one side. Well, they could go and have their communist commune or their socialist utopia somewhere, but the problem is that they want everybody to have it, and that's the problem, I think, with other people, even in the movement of the anarchist movement or everywhere else. They believe that everybody will, go into anarchy or this thing, and that's why I think voluntarism, and Ernie has been on that forefront for so many decades. Tim is, being that middleman that actually, we're anarcho-capitalists, so we want that, but we're willing to, give people other things in order for them to succeed or they're going to fail in other ways. But the problem here is greed, of course, on a global scale. And it's interesting. I downloaded, I have it in my report where I have a list of all the empires that existed throughout history. And there was like Germany was the last empire, but I actually added onto that list, I added the United States, because they're the definition of an empire, with occupying several countries around the world, military bases in almost every single country around the world. So that's definition of an empire. And of course, I had to add them in there. And now you have, with the fall of the U.S. dollar. So this is interesting. So let's just take a look at the first fiat empire that happened in the world. It was in China. It was the Sung Dynasty in 1024. They actually, created their first paper currency. And what they did, they initially had, I believe, backed by 30% was coinage that was backing, it was redeemable in coinage. The first issued printed, but then of course they started to issue debt. They started to print credit. They had a huge economic miracle, it was called, where people, started to have a lot of things. They started to have nice houses and all that stuff. And of course, at the end of it, the problem was that there was not enough people to fuel that empire, which we're seeing now around the world. We hit peak debt in so many areas. That's why we have these zombie corporations, all this. But they reached that peak debt in their economy. Then, of course, the other nations saw that they were getting weak, so they started to push on them. And of course, the Sung Dynasty started to just print tremendous amount of money, build up military, and then they started a big war with the Mongols at the time. And this was around probably, like, we're looking at the 1115s or something like that. And so what happened was that the Mongols came in and attacked them because they were weak, because it was falling currency. The currency was weak. They were just printed into oblivion. It was worth nothing. But then the problem is that new empire came in, then it divided into old empire. The old empire continued on with a new currency, paper currency that failed, about 70 years later. And then the new dynasty, the Qin dynasty, which was the Mongols, they actually didn't know about this paper currency, but they actually took all the whatever you call it, central bankers or whatever, and they took those people and they had them implement the same stupid system. And then, of course, they committed the same mistake. Both of those two separate empires over there in China. But that's what you're seeing in the United States now with all these policies that, been pushing debt over to record levels. We have debt at record lows. They've never even been this low, and we are so struggling because we're not willing to actually let the system fail. We're gonna just
they're not low enough. They need to be much lower.
They need to be they need to be historically negative.
They need to pay us to be borrowing money. That's just only fair. And of course, I've got an Alec Baldwin ad at the top of
yeah, but hey, Tim, when you have a whole bunch of nuclear weapons out there, it's easier to get people to, buy a shitty investment and get, lose money on their investment if you have a whole bunch of weapons turned against someone.
Yeah, and you know what this whole analogy you've done with all these empires is that this impeachment right now really is, the ultimate fiddling while Rome burns. We've got all these problems 100%. Going on, and it's like, and I was watching. I can only take like about 2 minutes of this at a time before it just makes me want to just lose my mind. And so I hear Chuck Schumer up there. That guy is such a gangster, and I mean that in a very bad way. Not like a respect gangster, but anyways, with this guy, he was up there, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, saying, with Trump, taking on the intelligence agencies, I think he said 6 ways to Sunday, but the real saying is 7 ways to Sunday to get back at you. And then I see him up there, and this is absolutely an intelligence coup against Donald Trump. And we spend a lot of our time talking crap against Donald Trump, but I will also admit that this is an absolute coup against him. And so for me, then I look at all these, limp dick Republicans who, what they should do is they should have a trial that lasts, months and months and months, and get out all the discovery. Okay, you want to find out what happened? Let's really find out what happened. Let's get Hunter Biden up there. Let's go get Nancy Pelosi's son, who's also involved in this. Let's go get John Kerry's son, who's involved in this. I forgot one of the other I think Chuck Schumer has a relative that's involved in this deal as well. And then let's start bringing out everybody. Let's start talking about Victoria Nuland. Let's start going way back in all this shit. And then let's go just burn this whole thing down. But the Republicans can't do this because they know that they have corruption on their side. They know that their hand's been caught in the cookie jar too, and so they can't really go after him. So they just want to let the Democrats just run roughshod over him the entire time. And really, the Democrats' plan this entire time has been, we're just going to put him on the defense the whole time, so that way he can't get anything done. And so Trump then, it's 3 years later, we still have Obamacare. Thanks, John McCain. Fuck you. Go rot in hell. Actually, I'm out here in Arizona, so I've had to deal with that guy for a very long time. And he is the guy who then started all this BS Russiagate stuff when he leaked the Steele dossier, which that was foreign intelligence. I mean that whole Steele thing, which then that goes into Hillary, and we're getting into a lot of political stuff. And so if Josh ends up watching this, Josh's head's going to explode because this whole thing is. Here we are calling this whole thing just a big ruse. But you know what? Fine, impeach. If this is the standard we're going to use to impeach somebody, first off, if you go to the letter of the law, every president should be impeached about 1,000 times over. But then you take a look at all the crap Obama was doing, whether it was running guns into Mexico. I made a whole top 10 list of crazy stuff that he was doing that liberals should have been outraged at. Starting the war in Libya and everything going on in Syria. There's so many things that Obama should have just been crucified over, and nothing happens. Crickets. And then they're saying, oh, there's no scandals at all in our administration. That's the best thing about this. While they're running guns into Mexico to then frame the Second Amendment, and then then saying, oh well, even if some border officers get killed, they got to scramble a few eggs. I think that was their literally exact quote over this. But yeah, the whole back to fiddling while Rome burns. But now I think it's then helping people become more voluntarist, because now people are thinking, obviously the current government's not really functioning at all. We're wasting all this time, money, effort, and resources, on this witch hunt. But you know what? Fine. Have every single president afterwards. If this is the new letter of the law that everyone needs to uphold, well then fine. Every single president come in here. How about they all get sworn in? Right around today, January 21st, and then boom, next week we just have articles of impeachment every single year. Just do it, because you know what? If that's what they wanted to go after Trump for, when a lot of stuff I don't like about him. People been following us know that originally I was a huge fanboy of him. Then immediately he then put in Jerome Powell, all these other swamp creatures, and I knew you surround yourself with a bunch of swamp creatures, and then they go and they turn their back on you. You put in John Bolton. Whose fault is that? And now we're getting into a lot of political stuff that and this is why I stopped talking about politics, because it just makes me so mad, and ultimately it doesn't really even mean anything. But kind of, I guess if we switch gears again into, I've got a chart right here that I want to show.
Before you do that, let me just say one more thing. There was actually a Hulu documentary that just came out, 4-part series, where Hillary Clinton it's called the Fury New Documentary, Trump Regrets and Harsh Words for Bernie. She actually said nobody likes him. Well, I think nobody likes you, Hillary, on top of that. The other problem is, you were talking about impeachment. How about we just impeach the whole freaking government? Because there's nobody there, almost left keeping, except for maybe a few dozen people. So it's just ridiculous. And this is not just the United States. This is everywhere. There's just blatant corruption. When you put people into political power, they get power to spend more money. Here in Canada, we just had our the Conservatives lost here, but then the Conservative leader, he for some reason had spent 800. No, I think it was 8 times more than any other Conservative leader in history of the money coming in from the people supporting them with donations. He'd used that for a whole bunch of private gains, and then he disappeared now. So it's just a shit show everywhere you go in politics. Look over in Britain. We're talking about Davos, and Britain not being there. Britain has its own massive issues, of course, and it's just complete chaos over there. they voted to leave Brexit, and then of course, where are we now? Like 3-4 years after,
And all we got was Megxit. That was
yeah, yeah. There's there's no exits here. We're literally like in the European Union. It's like a building that was built, and then of course they forgot to put emergency exits on it. That's what the European Union is right now. So
because
the European Union is burning.
It was supposed to, because you weren't. It's like as Peter Schiff will say, it's the Hotel California. You can get in, you can come in, but you can never leave. And so the goal was not to get people to leave. This was the German Fourth Reich plan. But if
look at
bankers.
Yeah, look at who is at. Yeah, sorry. Look at who's at the helm. It's Jean-Claude Juncker, a drunk son of the. He's actually an heir of the Juncker family that built all the bombers for the Nazis in the Second World War. So just hilarious. Like you have the head of one of the most powerful Nazi families in the Germany during the Second World War. Now I think it's their grandson. He's in power. Yes.
And who helped finance them was Prescott Bush and George H.W.
Yeah, J.P. Morgan and
Harriman.
others, right? Yeah.
So all these guys. All these guys did it. And and I guess another thing, and one thing that they don't have over there that they do have in America at least are somewhat strong gun laws. And so I will say that I was very pleased to see that there was no incidents going on. I personally thought there was probably some sort of false flag going on in Virginia. And so for those who don't know, there was, I don't know, I heard anywhere from 10,000 to 50,000 was the estimates. I mean, you can never trust these figures of how many people were there to support the Second Amendment. And I will give some props to the police who were there, I heard some sheriffs say things along the lines of, we're going to, deputize thousands of residents. So then that way they can't come and take the guns. But then I also saw that there was one guy there who was, checking things out ahead of time at the Capitol, and he had police drive over 100 miles away to then see what he was doing and visit him at his house. So, a lot of different things going on, but, politically, the only thing I'm really doing politically now is, and I could have just jumped on the Trump bandwagon because I was helping getting him elected. I really hated Hillary, but then, I wanted to be philosophical. So unlike guys like Stefan Molyneux and all these other people who've, see the dollar signs coming in and then, want to abandon the movement, for me, I see what the Libertarian Party is doing here in America, and a lot of it is sort of really pissing me off. I mean, you guys have a good leader up there in Canada. Not that I've ever seen good leader, but it seems like Tim Moen is doing a lot better job than.
Well, at least Tim is an borderline anarchist libertarian, so at least he is a lot better. Like he's all for free gun laws. He has a lot of good views.
He's got a good name. He got a good name too. So
yeah, getting him in, but the problem is he would never be able to get on TV here. They barely got Maxime Bernier out there, during the last elections. You had Maxime Bernier and the People's Party of Canada that was, heavily, promoted here. But then, of course, they didn't get enough votes to get anybody in. And, of course, in his home region where he was supposed to get voted in, they spent close to $1 million Canadian dollars to actually be able to, oust him. They had a campaign, the Conservative Party, because he used to be the leader, semi-leader. No, he was a MP of the Libertarian Party. No, sorry, of the Conservative Party in Canada. And then what happened was that he ran for leadership. He lost against this Andrew Scheer that I just talked about, that got thrown up because of a whole bunch of money spent. But he was trying to get in. I actually talked to Maxime Bernier. He was talking about 100% banking back in the day, and actually 100% reserve banking. So you can only lend out what you have, and all these
getting rid of fractional reserve.
He's very libertarian. But then Tim Moen reached out to the Olive Branch and said that, how about we merge the People's Party and our party? And the problem was that what they did is during that whole process, he turned it down. Maxime Bernier is too much of a politician, unfortunately. So he kowtowed to all the people that had borderline racist beliefs. Get these all these brown people out of the country kind of movement. There was a whole bunch of them in that party, unfortunately, that really destroyed the whole reputation of that. They had a very decent plan of that could really have stalled the whole collapse process of Canada. But now, of course, we're still sitting with the minority liberal government.
If you had racists in there, maybe they wanted to vote for Mr. Blackface himself, whatever his name is, Trudeau over there. Or
Yeah.
are we talking about the governor of Virginia? I mean, here's another guy.
Oh goodness, it's like all these politicians are just it just cracks me up sometimes how stupid they are. But I recently
It's like a white supremacist, a KKK member, and a guy in blackface walking
well,
to the
yeah,
bar. And then you go,
actually,
hello, Mr. Governor of Virginia. No, that's. But
well, what's really funny is that we just had what's his name, Trudeau was in Winnipeg here. You know, I don't have the stomach to do what Josh does. I just can't stand politicians and being around 90%, 99% of them. So people's like, oh yeah, go and confront Trudeau, and he's here, with all of his liberal
lackeys.
yeah, lackeys. So, but again, he was just here to tout more. They're actually like our local government said that, oh yeah, we're gonna do more to actually have some input on increasing. They're gonna actually put in a carbon tax there now because they actually have a carbon tax on gas already from the federal government, but they want to put in provincial carbon tax as well to make it easier for people here in Manitoba. They're saying, but it's pretty hilarious how you have a liberal government. No, we actually had NDP, which is borderline communist, here for 16 years, and then you turn around and now you have like socialism light, I call it, the conservatives. So it's very frustrating in politics. There's nothing being done. Nobody wants to deal with the big issues that are pensions are bankrupt. There's nowhere out of paying off any debt.
Well, do you guys have the same thing going on with with our Libertarian Party over here? I hate using these words like our, but we've got
don't use we.
So like guys like Nick Sarwark who are running things over here, and unfortunately, they want to kowtow to all the leftists. They want to kowtow to kind of like the Bernie Bros type people to bring them into the party. And then when it comes to actual libertarians, they want to basically say that we're racist, or guys like Tom Woods or white supremacists and all these other people who are actually doing things. And so Nick has pissed me off so much that now I'm gonna go down Saturday to the Arizona State Libertarian Party. I just registered, did all the other crap I needed to do, and then I'm going to go out to Austin, and then we're going to bring some other people with us, and then we're going to try to vote them out. And then we're also, because for me, it's not about voting to try to reach some. I mean, it's getting the will of the people, getting the changing the culture is more important. But part of that is I want the culture of the name libertarian to actually mean libertarian, like anarcho-capitalist. Push that version of libertarianism, not this like leftist, like you got to bake the cake. Oh, well, the Federal Reserve is, it's not my favorite.
Well, libertarian socialist. When did that make sense in history?
Oh, and the thing is, they want to kowtow and bring those people in while saying people like me and you and actual libertarians that we're the bad guys, that we can't be there. And so for me,
that's the problem with democracy, right there, isn't it?
For me, it's not about getting involved with the Libertarian Party. Is not about thinking that we're gonna win an election and that the world's going to change tomorrow. It's about trying to take over, reclaim what the word libertarian means, because none of these words mean anything. Conservative, that doesn't mean anything. Liberal, well, liberals are basically authoritarians that are anything but liberal. So these are all fake names. And so for me, I just want to kind of reclaim that name. And I think we've been going on for probably more than an hour right now. And I think, well, let's just kind of touch on some crypto stuff. And then
talk a little bit about the repo, what's happening over there in the repo markets and all that.
Now that could be like an entire hour long show talking about the repo.
But let's try to make it like a 5 to 10 minute segment at the end here, so we can get an update on what's going on.
I'm gonna take the over bet that this is probably gonna go over 5 minutes. So for those of you, but we'll keep it at 5. We'll see if John can do 5 minutes. Not that I'm any better at rambling and talking. Please.
Well, yeah. So where do you want to start? Do you want to start on cryptos, or should we go into?
Let's do the repo, because then that's like a perfect segue into like why we need crypto. But I know Josh was talking about an article yesterday where it showed 90 billion was lent in yesterday to cover. I think there was like a 2-week maturity one that was maturing, and I don't know. Did you see that?
I have I'll tell you exactly what it might be wrong. That article.
The other thing that's going on is they're monetizing the debt. Where there was, and I'm going to talk about this at Anarchapulco, so you guys can do promo code WHAM. So all of us will be over there at Anarchapulco throughout the whole week. You guys can come say, hey, what's up? Talk to us. We won't bite. But yeah, during this presentation, I'm going to get into where it shows the QSIP numbers. So that's where you can track the bond, or the note in this case, and where it shows the Treasury issued it to the big banks. Then it settles, and the day it settles, it then goes from the big banks back into the Fed. not back into the Fed, but first time going into the Fed. And so it's the Fed monetizing its own debt, which Osama Ben Bernanke, that's what I call Ben Bernanke, said explicitly that this was not going to happen back in 2009 and 10. And this real quick before I let John go on, because this is the chart I was going to show before. So right now what we're showing on screen is this is market value of household holdings of equities, aka stocks, versus consumer spending. So it should be, as consumer spending is going up, you should see stocks going up. What you're seeing is, consumer spending is, maybe going up at like a 45-degree angle, barely, it's rising. But then right around 2010, this is, when QE1, the TARP and all this other stuff is starting to go on. So late 2009, 2010, all of a sudden you see a gigantic divergence from stocks and consumer spending, meaning, and the reason for this is because a lot of this money from the Federal Reserve is going into the stock market to buy up these assets. But if you're Neil Kashikari, and Josh and I did a video on this the other day, he's calling us QE conspiracist, and there's no correlation between Fed money printing and the stock market, which, that's laughable. But anyway, sorry, John, I've already burned up 3 of the 5 minutes. So what do you got on the repo?
Yeah, you literally like trying to jinx me, or you said that, this will take longer, and then you burned up my time. What is it all about?
I like when Ernest Hancock is like, let me summarize this. I'm like, you're gonna summarize it? You're the most long-winded person I know. Okay.
Yeah, it's really funny. But anyway, so let's take a look at these charts that we got going here. What's interesting is, like, when you take a look here, let me share my screen here right now. Let's just go to share my screen right now so everybody can see.
And this is all being done in live time, and these eventually will be live. So, Josh will go and he'll dub it in over, but John and I don't really have the time to do that. Okay, yeah, here we go. Okay. We can see the infogram right now.
Yeah, so this is actually my report that I'm putting out for $14 right away. I'm just having a couple of bigwigs looking at it and giving me some feedback on it right before I make it public. But here you can see this is the actual Federal Reserve balance sheet. So you can clearly see that, something happened here. This is down in September, of course.
It's about 3.7 trillion if
yeah,
those you were
listening. And then now we're up here. It doesn't look like, here we go. This is the last actual number, and this is from the 15th of January. The Fed's balance sheet fell down just slightly here. Let's see if we can actually get the data. It's hard when here we go. So it was down at 4.149 trillion dollars, the balance sheet, and then you can see it actually jumped up again,
which is still up like 500 billion over the past 4 months. So let's just put that out there too.
Oh yeah, of course. Like from the bottom, it's up about 500 something.
And they told us that this was going to go down to zero. That the balance sheet was going to be, first it said 2 trillion, then they started saying it was going to be down to zero. This is like a 600-pound person lost 10 pounds and then had to immediately go back, eating 20 hamburgers a day because they couldn't take it. And this is like what's going on right now with the Fed. Sorry, I burned up more time.
No, no problem. No, so what you're seeing right now is this balance sheet is, bouncing a little bit up and down, but it's the trend is upwards. And this is from the 8th. You saw it was 4.149 trillion. So it actually jumped up 20 trillion, but then it was a little bit further up again. So it's jumping a little bit up and down. It hasn't increased as much actually as it was lately. But what is interesting about this is if you go and look at the overnight repo operations, that was supposed to be done when I think it was November. They were supposed to be done with this, but you can see that it's continued. But what is interesting here, Tim, if you can see the chart here, you see the red is treasuries. So you see actually like treasuries are not used as collateral as much anymore. So whoever is now asking for help, and you can see the trend is quite upwards.
Mortgage-backed securities, because people will be listening to this on a podcast as well. So I just want to be able to make sure that people who are listening to this know. Yeah. But we see mortgage-backed securities now are taking up a much bigger percentage, which then is keeping the mortgage interest rates low, which is perfect because my wife only gave me 2 years to rent, and we're now coming up to those 2 years. So I've got to now buy a house at one of the worst times possible, unless the Fed keeps printing money, and then who the heck knows. But anyways, thank you, Fed, for making my next mortgage payment be much lower than it otherwise would have. But then again, that is then making the house price more than it should, because in a free market, the interest rate going up would then collapse the home prices, which would still probably have about the same net effect. But
yeah, actually, there was 2 articles that I had posted for our podcast today, which was, one says that we're sitting on a $35 trillion bubble in real estate, and then another one, no, $35 billion bubble in real estate. And there was another one that was saying that, let me just pull it up here quickly before I forget it.
But what makes a difference, but what makes it interesting though, is if the bubble is in the dollar, you could actually then have the dollar value of this going up. And then I just want to also point out again that we will be posting all these articles on Discord. John has got just like a massive amount of show notes here, probably of like, I don't know, 20, 30 articles. We're probably between both of us posting about 20 articles a day that we think, are pertinent. And we're going to do more hanging out there because let's face it, we don't want to be building up YouTube. We don't want to be building up Facebook. I had a following of over 32,000 people within 3 months on Facebook. Boom. I've got less today than I did 3 years ago. And then at Wham, we've been stuck at 136 for probably like 3 or 4 months now because none of our videos get shown to anybody. And just one last thing is I did see that you had a message coming in from a Victoria on LinkedIn. So maybe it was Victoria Newland who was like, hey, you're going to be next. We're going to
Victoria Newland. Yeah.
I don't know. You're friends with everybody on LinkedIn, so who knows? Knowing you,
actually, we talked about Neil Kashkari.
Yeah, you're friends with Neil Kashkari on LinkedIn, aren't you? I know because you're actually a hidden Jesuit that's trying to mislead the liberty movement.
No, that's exactly what I am, Tim. It's you caught me there, right-handed. No, this is sorry. I was having issues here because my Zoom was in the way of clicking on the tabs here. But here, let's pull up this article that I really wanted to talk about quickly before we continue with the repo update. America just had its best month for new home constructions in 20 years. So there you go, Tim. It's now that the interest rates are low, everybody's starting to finally pile back into real estate again in the United States, and it's time for another real estate bubble on top of all the other bubbles.
Yeah, because that's actually when we started building a house was in December too. So I guess I helped add to that stat, helping ringing the bell at the top. But again, it's not because I want to; it's because
everybody has a wife that are hounding them to buy them a nice house, Tim. That's what's going on here, and problem is that not everybody can afford it like you actually can. So that's that's the biggest problem. Or yeah, you might have that massive increase in.
Oh my god! And you guys will probably think this is hilarious, but dealing with these like mortgage bankers. I mean, I'm dealing with this lady named Chichi. I mean, to give you an idea of what not to make any disparaging comments over somebody's name, but name is probably very fitting. And so here I've got Chichi talking to me about interest rates and how interest rates work. And I'm like, you do realize that thousands of people literally listen to me for my take on interest rates and where things are going and things I predicted. And then they're like, oh, we can teach you how to make it so your business shows more income. I'm like, the goal is not to show more income. The goal is to pay less in taxes. Like anyone could figure out how to pay more in taxes.
Oh, this is the thing is here, Tim, too, is like they want to push you actually to look better, to dress you better. So like the numbers looks better as well. And this is, what was it in auto-backed, in auto loans, there was, I think BNP Paribas or whoever it was had like 60 to 80% of their auto loans, they fiddled with the numbers on them, and that is starting to get eerily similar to the CDO crisis. Before the end, Tim, I also wanted to show like the derivatives that are currently in circulation, like CDOs versus how much actually exists in what it was with the collateralized debt obligations back in the day, because it's a very, very interesting chart. I gotta say, okay, Tim, at the end. But let's look at the 12-day term repo operation. So what was interesting, Tim, we just to get quickly into it, they did overnight lending. What seems to have happened is that they can't keep on rolling them on
14-day terms. Are these 14-day terms or 12?
Yeah, 14. Okay. Well, 12. Yeah, 12. But I just made it easy to call the 14-day term because it's like sometimes it's 14 days that they're payable back for. It's 15. Like it depends on how the
32-day ones now.
Yeah, but it depends on how the weekends and stuff are. But for the 14, so 2 weeks basically, that's what it is. The 2-week term, they had to what I think started happening was that they had to actually turn over and flip over and actually start, going longer term on these repos because they couldn't just do overnight anymore. Liquidity seems to be maybe, starting to dry up, Tim. And what you're seeing is that they had to go longer term in order to be able to pay back what they owe in the overnight lending market. So now they're going into 14-day terms. It's not, of course, as much as the other ones, but you've seen there's a fair amount that's in here. And also you've seen the same trend at the last couple of weeks, where you have suddenly, well, actually the last issuance, which was on the 21st, which is just yesterday, you see that mortgage-backed securities again have taken over for treasuries as a collateral. And then, of course, let's go to the 1 month. So the 1 month hasn't been issued for a little while, but it was a whole
And
bunch
for those of you
them.
listening, this is an incredibly detailed report with infographics and like the whole 9 yards, and you're getting a ton of value out of this. So I just wanted to point that out as well.
Yeah, no, it's definitely part of a huge report. Actually, it ended up being 178 pages when I was all done with it. But here you can see the 1 month term repo operations, and what you can see here is, of course, the same kind of trend where you see mortgage-backed securities taking over here as well. But this was back in, excuse me, back in December. So you can see that most of the 1 month, term operations, the extension of debt here was done back in December, and now it's we're past that, so we haven't seen that being rolled over. What might have happened with this debt, Tim, all these treasuries and securities, I think, with the outright purchases that they're doing through their quantitative easing program on the other side of repo, I think they've been buying these. And if I can actually quickly show that here, let's go to the website. I'm just going to find the right one. So this is Treasury securities operations. So this is how they buy. This is beside, the repo operations. And here you can see just in like yesterday, you saw there was $12.811 billion of treasuries that was submitted for purchase to the Federal Reserve, and 1.80 billion was bought by the Federal Reserve. So you've seen that they're actually accumulating here, and you can see all the different coupons. So you can actually see down to the detail the actual debt. So if you go and look these numbers up, you'll actually find out what they bailed out.
And right now we're at newyorkfed.org, and you can see the QSIP numbers, which is tracking the actual bonds. So I mean, if we wanted to do some real investigative journalism, but John and I both have jobs too, we could actually also see that those probably then originated from the Treasury, and which then went to the banks, which then went from the banks back to the Fed. And I had a video called like "Why Central Banking is Slavery," where I was on this whole whiteboard about 3 years ago breaking down a lot of these things. And the other thing I broke down was, even back then, we knew that as of October of 2018, that the Fed would start selling $50 billion a month off their balance sheet. And I was even saying back then, there's no way that could happen because the biggest buyers of the Fed debt is the Fed. And now they're going to be the biggest sellers. I'm like, there's no way that's going to happen. Anyways, I've mentioned that story about 1 million times, so I won't keep going into it. And now we're probably like 15 minutes into the 5-minute deal. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, for sure. But so one more thing before we kind of leave a little bit behind the whole repo operations, and this is beside repo now. Now we're talking about, we just showed you the actual buying of, like, outright buying from the Federal Reserve of treasuries. This is the mortgage-backed security side of it. And here you could also see, if you wanted to go in here, you could actually see the security description and everything. The last operation was on the 17th. It was 1.30 billion was submitted, 202 had to be bought, and then it shows the actual.
Basically, the Fed is becoming a mortgage broker. I mean, essentially, is that the banks don't really have any liability because they send the mortgages, they package them up, and then buy into the Fed. And then and I wanted to say this quote, a little while ago when you were talking about, first they'll own everything and they'll own nothing. I mean, Thomas Jefferson said, first by inflation, then by deflation, our forefathers will end up homeless on the continent our forefathers conquered. And they've also said things like, if you ever allow a private central bank to issue currency and credit of a nation, that was actually the beginning part of that quote, that with the stroke of a pen, that eventually the banks can buy up everything, because they take an asset that never even existed to begin with, print up money, and then lend that money to a builder. And then if somebody then the house is built and then somebody defaults, they never had that the bank never had that money to begin with, but now they own an actual physical asset. Somebody defaulted. And that's what's happening now, is that a private group of bankers are going to eventually own the entire world, because basically this indoctrination system we have around the world, that was actually like a Nazi type system. The American education system we brought over the Nazis to then help
When you got it's a part of the Persian system, the old Persian
Kindergarten. I
Empire.
mean,
Yeah.
kindergarten's even a
Yeah. Yeah,
German word.
it's all a part of like being obedient to the government, and being obedient to big corporations. Always, never question anything, and
Charlotte Iserbyt,
yeah.
she's the one who wrote a book. Like I think she was like secretary, like assistant secretary of education for like 3 or 4 different people. Like her dad and her husband were both Skull and Bones, and so I mean she was on the inside track. And she wrote a book.
Yeah.
I think it was called Deliberate Dumbing Down of America, where basically she went into that they deliberately set up the system. But yeah, they set up the system to get a bunch of yes men, get a bunch of slaves, and that's why we're in a situation now where we can have a central bank that's ruling over us, that is effectively buying up everything. And it's like if the banker monopoly just keeps putting $1,000 on the board every 5 minutes. Well, now people are going to bid up the prices of Boardwalk and Park Place, not because they're worth more, but because the money is actually worth less because there's more money on the board.
100%. And that's the big key here, Tim, is that they actually have these issues where there's literally like all these assets, the stocks, bonds, whatever it is. I actually have in my report that I won't show you right now because it's like I can't show you all the report, but in there I actually do a comparison to the Venezuelan stock market, and the meteoric rise, over 500,000% rise that it had. But the problem was it was far less than the inflation was. So even though the stock market went up in value, it didn't go up enough for the actual value of the currency to be retained at all.
And you get people who here in America be like, oh, the good old days when interest rates were 18%. I'm like, yeah, well, if inflation was 22 and the interest rate was 18, you're still losing 4% per year. But now let's start wrapping up and start talking about
right before that. Sorry. I just found something interesting scrolling down. And look at this one, Tim. This is an interesting one here because they actually bailed out 80. This is back in December 5th, Tim. Look at this, $83.54 billion worth of a mortgage-backed security that they had to bail out there. And you can see the specific one. This is actually doesn't. I'm not sure if this is Freddie Mac or Freddie Mae. This is like a 30-year something that was bailed out to security. But look at what was submitted. Almost $1 trillion, Tim, of mortgage-backed securities was submitted in December there. So this is insane. Like, this just shows you how bad in trouble they are. And of course, they only took just over 10% of that. And then one last thing before we're going to go, Tim, over to the last topic of cryptocurrency. And let me I just wanted to show you, because we've been talking about the derivative of, that a mortgage-backed security is. I think it's appropriate to actually show people, what is going on in the derivatives today. And here, let's take a look here. We're going to go to this one. And this one here is very interesting because this one shows this is the CDOs during the so the collateralized debt obligations during the crisis of 2008, and you can see the peak here in 2007. We had $145.8 billion of underlying mortgages on those credit collateralized debt obligations. Sometimes I have tongue rolls.
But a couple of weeks ago, I was at a wedding and asking somebody what they did, and they're like, "Oh, well, actually, and they didn't know that I was in finance. And they're like, I work with CDOs and CLOs, and mainly mainly it's for non-investment grade, corporate commercial real estate." He's like, and some people are going to say we're going to cause the next big crash, but I don't know. It's like, I got to get a job, so I'm happy with it now. But
that's exactly what it is. Look at this. This is the CLOs. Look at the collateralized loan obligation. It's the same thing, but just with corporate debt. And 78% in 2018, Tim, 78% of all the debt issued was sub-investment grade. It's junk.
And then about half of the investment grade is triple B, which is one notch away from non-investment grade. Junk.
Yeah, and you can find all that in my report. Actually, I have every single little detail.
Can you kind of break down what a CLO is? Because a lot of people probably have no idea.
Yeah, collateralized.
3/5 of the way to clown. Okay, but let's go to CLO.
Yeah, let's go up here. So collateralized loan obligations is very similar actually to what a what a credit default and the collateralized debt obligation was.
And
It's a
now the
whole
people at home are like, well, then what the fuck is a CDO? This is a credit default obligation then. Because if they don't know what that is, then they don't know how to describe what the CLO is.
Well, actually, to search this up in really great detail and super easy to find, I think one of the best explanations I ever gotten was with a guy called Stephen Kendall. We did an actual whole thing where me and him, we went into collateralized debt obligations, mortgage-backed securities, and how they put this all together. Because what they do is they take different types of debt. So you can see the senior secured loans, unsecured subordinated debt, and equity. And they have these different pools and different types of collateralized loan obligations. What they do with them is they take a whole bunch of these loans, they pull them and they put them into what's called a special purpose vehicle or a special purpose entity. It's a lot of times it's an offshore corporation that the banks can offload bad debt into. And so that's what they do. So they offload all the bad debt into these vehicles. They tranche these vehicles. They put a whole bunch of them with, one of these vehicles could have, 100 to 1,000 different loans in them.
And when you say special purpose vehicle, it makes me think of like the, what is it, the new Elon Musk Cybertruck is like what it makes me think of for some reason when you're saying that.
Yeah, no, it's basically, yeah. It's basically just a whole bunch of loans just put together, and then they have different tranches. So, but what's interesting is they're supposed to have more AAA rated tranches. But the problem is, like, what I've seen in Canada on the mortgage-backed security side is that they take it, they had, for example, Home Capital Group collapsed. They had to be bailed out $13 billion. Their home lender here in Canada. Well, what happened now?
Your guys' version of like Countrywide of what was going on.
Yeah, exactly. So, but what happened was that, of course, his name Warren Buffett came in and bailed him out $13 billion. But what happened on top of that? Now, I think it was like 6 months after, they issued a mortgage-backed security that was AAA rated that you could invest in. And this is the insanity. Like, they just defaulted, and now suddenly all the debt is totally fine, and all these offloaded credit, mortgage-backed securities are totally fine. Like that comes as a very surprise, and even AAA rated anything at all other than a nation that could print oblivious amount of money is totally insane. So any of these rating agencies that raise anything AAA, but the problem is, for pension funds and all these big institutional money to invest in it, it has to be a AAA rated, for great security. But the problem is it's definitely not. And so they basically can put in, let's say 5 to 10% AAA rated, but then underneath that, there's a whole bunch of garbage that are, triple B or below rated.
Then there's the corruption of then who owns the rating agencies. Well, it's the same companies that are, the same big pension funds that need to then have the ratings be at a certain level. And then if you don't give them the rating, then they'll just go down the street to Moody's or S&P or Fitch. And, just look what happened. I think it was Moody's that downgraded the U.S. debt in 2011. And then all of a sudden the United States is like, well, you're not allowed to grade our debt anymore, some crap like that. I think Buffett owns a big one of those. But let's, now we're probably like, into 20 minutes, even with my interrupting. I think I definitely won that bet. Let's just
let's stop. I'm going to stop sharing now, Tim.
And I just want to have maybe 2 minutes here on cryptocurrencies. So it's been a while since we talked about crypto. I haven't really talked about it too much at all, but I did make a Facebook post a few months ago where I was going over the fear and greed index. And basically every time everybody's like, crypto's dead, and, it's holding on by a string, which that would represent, let's say you're down in like the single digits. So on a scale of 0 to 100, like a 10, all the way up to, maybe like a 25 or 30 is extreme fear. And then once you start getting up to like 70, 80, 90, 100, then you're in extreme greed. And from what I've seen, every time you're down at those bottom numbers, it's been a great time to get in. And what we've seen, of course, in the 7 days here, it doesn't look that great. But if you go back to like 30 days, Bitcoin's up 15%. 1 year, it's up 144%. And, I came out with the Crypto Wealth Show, right around the bottom of this last bear market we had here. And the reason I did that is I didn't want to just be one of these guys who comes out and everything was great. I wanted to show that, if you can't stick with it, you can't promote Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies when it's low, then you shouldn't have any business promoting it when it's up high either. Bitcoin Cash the past 30 days is up almost 75%, 1 year up 182%. Ethereum is up 44% over 1 year, 26%. over the last 30 days. And then, we've got Bitcoin SV, which in my opinion, that was just a whole bunch of wash trading done by billionaires like Craig Wright and Kelvin Ayre, don't sue me, fake Satoshi, that I think that, that there's people engaged in some sort of wash trading to be able to get the price of Bitcoin SV up higher because it's not a regulated.
Hey, don't attack Satoshi. He's the real Satoshi. Come on.
He's not suing everybody, saying that, if you're saying he's not okay, good. If you sue me, then it makes me a lot more popular, and everyone, and I'll go right like the other guy did in a cran. And in one of his lawsuits, the guy responded back in like literally like a cran, like they just showing no respect at all to Craig Wright. But anyways, yeah, the market's been on an absolute tear. It started going on a tear back when we bombed the Iranian dude. I forgot his name, Soleimani, whatever.
Soleimani, yeah.
And so in Iran, you saw the price of Bitcoin on local Bitcoins. I think there was like a gigantic premium going on over there. Also want to give
they have a hyperinflation over there too.
Also want to give a shout out to Dr. Mike, who made this nice Bitcoin. I don't know what you'd call it, but nice little. He's a listener of Wham, and then he sent me this, and looks nice. It's on my desk, and I know that he does have these available for sale that you probably can't see now because it's the BitChute mug is covering it up. But anyways, no, I appreciate that. So if you guys do want to send us gifts, it's something we do accept. So but yeah, I mean, I am long term very bullish on cryptocurrencies because I know that the central bank plan is to print a bunch of money. I don't necessarily consider it a safe haven when in terms of like when everything is going down. I think this will go down as well. But then I think the response to the crisis will be so much money printing and some sort of war or some other BS that will then be the catalyst. So ultimately, I mean, I really do think you'll see $100,000 Bitcoin. But don't get mad at me if you can't handle it going down to 1,000, then don't be in it. So you've been warned right now that if you don't have your big boy pants on or your cisgendered, non-binary, neutral pants on, then don't be in it. I mean, because it's a very dangerous market. Only put in money you can afford to lose. Do your own research. I know we always get hit with the same comments like, this is going to be the mark of the beast and you guys are idiots for not being able to see this. Episode number 1 I did, that first crypto episode I ever did, was on that subject where we do recognize that. But it's all currencies going to be digital. It's just whether or not you want to have one that can't be tracked, traced, surveilled, which isn't Bitcoin, by the way, or do you want to have the Fed.gov, Goldman Sachs Goldman Sachs coin. I mean, so that is going to be, that's going to happen. There's articles every day you can see about different central banks looking into this. I think I saw one yesterday that showed there was like 5 or 6 central banks. They're all coordinating on some sort of central bank coin, which will probably model somewhat after the Libra. It's just the Libra got too big for their non-binary.
Yeah, it was actually Canada tried to do Ripple. I remember we were talking about the Jasper project. Yeah, Jasper, and then you had the central bank of Singapore having Project Uniper. So they tried to do it. I talked to actually one of the head developers at Payments Canada, which is just a sub organization of the Bank of Canada. He said that they actually have stopped looking at Ripple, but they have something called real-time transfer now. That they're working on, RTR or something, I think it's called.
And the Fed is working on something similar too. I don't know if it's called.
Yeah, Fed now, I believe. Right. So you have all these, like these are going to be like called the stable coins or whatever they want to try to name them.
When I see Jasper, I'm thinking of like Jasper, your friendly central bank. It's like Casper the friendly ghost or something.
Well, I think of the most beautiful place on earth, and when they use Project Jasper, it's like literally like the whole Rocky Mountains where Jasper is blew up in a gigantic volcano. That's what they are, making Jasper sound like, which is a beautiful natural pearl here in Canada.
Speaking of volcanoes, that's where all the basic climate change is going on, and CO2 is from the volcanoes.
Just spit out a little bit. Yeah, just spit out a little bit of CO2 every time they erupt.
Yeah, but anyways, we really appreciate everyone who's been watching, listening. This will be available on podcasts, especially on Wham. This is not the typical video that you're used to, where it's just a report. This is John and I, shooting the breeze and lots of different things. Didn't have, a lot of this necessarily planned out of what we're going to talk about, but we will hope to do more of these in the future. Some of these might not make it onto YouTube, so we'll do more kind of like informal ones on our Discord in the future. It's been a really tough month with me, traveling and then getting sick and then having to recover from getting sick, of catching back up at work and all the other crap that goes on with life. So, please, hit up, subscribe to us on the podcast. Also, obviously, subscribe to us if you're watching this on World Alternative Media. We've got the Discord links down below. And that's just a way where it's going to be harder for us to get shadow banned. We're trying to create some community there. And also, I mean, if you're going to be trolling us on Discord, at least you've got to do some work to do it. Whereas on YouTube, it doesn't, anyone can just make comments and try to be mean or something. But, I know we're going to get comments that this is too long and get down to the point. But, this is not, we've got plenty of report format shows. About 99% of them are report format shows. So go watch one of those if you don't like these. But, some people will like these. This one's probably a lot longer than what they normally will be. They'll probably be closer to like an hour, I'm guessing. This one's probably closer to 2 hours. I don't know. I don't have a watch on right now. But anyways, we definitely appreciate everyone watching. I don't know, John, you got anything you want to say? You got your report coming up that you have for sale now. We also have, we're going to be at Acapulco, so promo code WHAM for that. I'm going to be at the Dollar Vigilante Summit that you guys can go watch us at least watch myself at the TDV Summit at Acapulco right before. And anyways, I hope to see a lot of people down there. Come say what's up to me. And that's all I got. I don't know if you got any parting words, John?
Well, I do just have a couple to promote myself.
5 minutes or less? No.
No, I just have a couple to promote myself quickly. It's of course you can check out my books. I was very happy. I checked out the amount of actually reviews online now, and I'm almost at the same amount of reviews as Mike Maloney. I have 27. He has 32. So we're getting close to the same on Amazon, and it's this book here that's really taken off. It's called Canada, the Greatest Economy in the World, ? I actually go into the Canadian economy, talk about it, and why I see a lot of upcoming issues. I have a lot of financial advisors that are reading it, apparently, that I found out. Accountants, like they're very interested to see where we're heading, because they would be the one that are going to be blamed, if things hit the fan. So they really need to stay updated. So especially for those guys, that's very important. But for the general public, this is a very interesting and very easy to read book. It's not like picking up James Bricker's book and trying to read it, hardcore economics language. And then, of course, it's The End of Freedom, How Our Monetary System Enslaves Us. You could get that on Amazon. You could get it on my website, theeconomictruth.org. And then within the next week or so, I'll be launching my global investment risk report of 2020, where I go into everything basically in the world economy, from all types of assets, from forex to crypto to precious metals to commodities to stocks, bonds, and housing, real estate. I basically almost touch upon everything in there. It's I couldn't accommodate everything in every country because that'd be ridiculous.
We're just going to call it Joe Biden. We're just going to call it Joe Biden because you're just going to touch everything.
Oh God, Joe Biden report. That's terrible. Anyways, but yeah, so you can find that very soon on theeconomictruth.org as well. It's an online report, and we show parts of it actually here in the video. So yeah, stay tuned for all of that. It's very exciting, and I very much look forward to hanging out with Tim. We're hanging out in Acapulco together this year, and we're going to do some reports, probably some interesting interviews. There's a couple of good names down there for the Dollar Vigilante Summit
me and Tim a whole bunch of awesome people are going to be there. Yeah. And great weather. I mean, actually it's been pretty crappy weather out here in Phoenix, which isn't.
Hey, it's a global cooling. I'm calling it. It's called the global solar minimum.
It's been raining for like 3 days straight, and actually I was supposed to have my first ever tennis match yesterday, and it ended up getting canceled. I'm like, so meanwhile, at 34 years old, I was gonna try my first. Never even played before.
What is Phoenix turning into? I thought it was good down there.
I know I am. I live like right next to Sun City, and it's like super overcast and raining, and one of the most dry, sunny places on earth. I'm like, great, go figure. Anyways, and actually it was weird. Last year coming back from Acapulco, it actually snowed in Phoenix, Arizona. Like literally the day after. I'm like, great. I'm supposed to be flying to a vacation destination where like a week and a half ago it was 75 degrees and now it's snowing. So
hey, for us up in Canada, Phoenix is the vacation destination.
No, we got tons and tons of Canadians over here. But anyway, we're rambling now. We appreciate everyone who's watching this. Leave us some comments. On the Discord, you can interact with us. I haven't been as as active as I'd like to be, just because I was sick and getting over that. But anyways, now, you know, a lot of the articles that we share on a daily basis are going to be there. We'll have more informal reports over there. We'll probably just going over the news of you know, not that this is like super formal either, but yeah. So, you know, hit us up on the Discord. You know, great way to keep in touch. Especially, you know, we saw, you know, YouTube was taking down crypto channels. YouTube doesn't like people talking about the Federal Reserve. YouTube doesn't like people who you know, aren't communists who are talking about politics. And so check all the stuff. I mean, YouTube doesn't like, you know, people like Josh going and confronting criminals like Trudeau. And so just you pick out the reason why they want to shadow ban us, and we've done it. So
yeah, and exactly with him, like Discord is going to be the place where we might just do like little you know, premium content that's suddenly just going to pop up like a live stream that we're just doing, or just me are doing whenever we have time. So just stay tuned for that. Like, keep your eye on the Discord channel, because a lot of fun stuff is coming our way there. And I think it's going to be a great thing for the next for this whole next year.
Unless you hate economics and crypto and politics and finance.
Well, yeah,
then it'll be like the most beautiful place in the world, and will not be fun at all. So maybe don't have your girlfriend listen or watch unless she's into this stuff. So
exactly,
they won't think it's fun. Anyways, peace out, guys. I'm Tippett Choate, the Liberty Advisor. This is John Snyson, the Economic Truth, and this is our first ragtag show we're putting together here. Hope you guys like it, and we'll look forward to the comments. And I'm sure the comments I already know they're going to be like, "You guys are way too long. I only got 10 minutes. Boil it down." We know that's for reports.
Hey, that's why you need audio. Put it on in your car.
Boom, audio in this
podcast.
Yep. All right, man. I'll see you guys later, and thank you very much for the first introductory show. And talk to you guys later.